Wonderful. So let's go ahead and get started so that we can honor everybody's sense of time. I am Amy Parker. I'm the coordinator of the Orientation and Mobility Program at Portland State University. We're very proud this evening to be hosting one of our first graduates of our Orientation and Mobility Program, Sarah Moreau, who will be our lead presenter. Also, my dear colleague, Mary Tellefson, has been a partner in creating this program and has contributed tremendous content to the program, as well as being Sarah's university supervisor. We also want to recognize and thank Elijah Haynes, who has been Sarah's mentoring professional there in Alaska, the great state of Alaska. One of the first things that you'll notice on the slides, which you will all be given access to, you will be sent a link to these slides because there are so many embedded videos. But one of the links on the first slide here is to a free resource that we're actually piloting at Portland State University. It's called Maximizing O&M Services, a module that we've actually developed here at Portland State to address the real varied needs in our region. On this next slide, I will just go through a few of the purposes of the workshop. And if people could make sure that their sound is off, that would be really helpful. Great. We'll be using the chat pod actively. We're going to be talking today about some rationale and approaches for using synchronous distance consultation, specifically in Alaska. Sarah's going to be presenting a case study to you, but all of this work has come out of a systematic review of the literature that we've done at Portland State to really try to understand distance consultation approaches. I'm going to move a little quickly through this so that we have enough time to get right into the content itself. To state the obvious, and many of you already know this, you know this in Australia because some of the literature that we've reviewed has come out of Australia, that there are just a lack of O&M services in rural and remote areas. This has been documented by multiple researchers over time. So it's a little bit like saying water is wet. We have a responsibility to provide services to individuals regardless of where they live. We know that there is a national and international shortage of O&M professionals. So our baby program at Portland State, we just are in our third cohort. We are beginning our third year of orientation mobility. We looked at the needs of our region and our unique region and knew that we had to somehow address this at the start. The O&M program very briefly began because of the needs in the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and Hawaii. And we were given a grant through the US Department of Education to begin to launch a program. Some of our specific areas of interest are individuals who are deaf-blind and those who have additional disabilities, looking at culturally responsive practices for families and individuals. And then again, you'll see this part C, helping prepare O&Ms through distance mentorship and consultation when appropriate. So we really wanted to explore this practice. So this slide has an interesting image on it. It is actually an image of Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii. The data on this map, it's an infographic that talks about the specific regional needs. There's quite a land mass that is represented by these states, but there's also quite a need. There's a need that's based on the numbers, the estimates of students with visual impairment. We know that sometimes we have good counts and sometimes we don't. And that's because of a lack of infrastructure in some of our states to actually get an accurate count of students and adults with visual impairment and deaf blindness. But this data was meant to create some estimates around the needs of TVIs and O&Ms and the projected retirements. So out of that, that was part of what persuaded the US Department of Education to give us some money to start the Orientation and Mobility Program, and more importantly, to provide scholarships to our students. There's also an image on the slide of cohort one of our members of our cohort one, Caroline, and she's traveling in the Portland State University Library using a cane and using a wayfinding app, and she's wearing a blindfold. Very quickly, we don't do things alone. It takes a village, right, Sarah? Part of what our whole story today is about, the village that helped create some of the knowledge around this practice. And Sarah being brave and being a new comms and a seasoned TVI, and someone who has pursued low vision certification as well. He is taking on this practice. But we also want to recognize some people who are actually on the call today with us. And we're going to ask people to go on mute. We might have to remind you when you come in to go on mute. Thank you. We want to, on the slide, there are several images of colleagues in our field who co-created the content in the distance consultation module, which you all have access to, and we would really like your feedback on it. So just names on the slide are Nicholas Casillas from Cal State LA, Donna Sauerberger, respected comms for many years in the field with adults, Hong Fantia DeWald, who has a practice with young children, Laura Ozios Townsend from Washington State with a background in assistive technology and as a comms, Cheryl Williams from Wisconsin, and Mary Tellefson from Wisconsin, who works very closely with us at Portland State. We designed this module, and again, we'll reference it as a reference point for what Sarah is going to talk to you about. Some of you may look at what she does in some of the videos that she will show you and have a little bit of trepidation, have a little feeling of, oh my goodness, what are we looking at here? What are we talking about? But you need to know that we started exploring this and looking at the literature, including the literature from Australia, before there was a pandemic. And we know we wanted to share this with you today because of the particular context that we're now all facing, where we are not allowed to be face-to-face with many of our students and clients. So this module and the timing of this discussion, we felt was also timely for you to give us some feedback. Okay. We are in the midst of field testing this module. We do not claim that it is research-based. We did integrate the available research that was available into the module principles, but we are definitely testing and refining it. And Sarah's presentation is actually a part of that. There are also some opportunities after this webinar, just very briefly to mention to you that if you're interested in being a part of a focus group with us that talks more about distance consultation, we would be thrilled to connect with you. And part of what we will put in the chat pod is a link where you can express your interest, but feel no pressure to participate or not participate. But we are very interested in the opinion and experiences of practitioners, particularly comms and teachers of students with visual impairments, on this practice of distance consultation. We are also, as I mentioned earlier, looking at culturally responsive practices, because we know that just because something works in one condition, it does not necessarily work in all conditions. And we're mindful of the diversity, even within our own region, culturally and geographically. So the module, the synthesis of the module, we not only talk about distance consultation as a means of augmenting face-to-face services, we talk about synthesizing group instruction, using the practice of role release, perhaps with paraprofessionals. Dr. Casillas, who is with us from Cal State LA and who helped co-create the module, actually did his dissertation research on that. So we integrated that as a potential practice into the module. Many of us use flexible scheduling already. We talk about what proximal co-teaching might be in terms of working with other professionals as peers, with the comms perhaps being the lead in providing the instruction, but other professionals reinforcing what the comms is teaching and working on that synchronously. And of course, clustering, which is just a means of putting people together and being smart about how we serve people while we are in those rural and remote areas, or perhaps through a camp. We also talk about the importance of professional and consumer learning communities, which is a part of why what your participation is tonight is so important. So now I'm going to very happily turn the reins over to my colleague, Sarah Moreau.
Sarah, this is Becky. I'm going to stop you real quick just to announce the opening code for those that are pursuing ACVREP credits. I put it in the chat pod, but the opening code is Hummingbird. And there will be a closing code at the end and a link to a form where you can submit for those credits.
Good afternoon, good evening, maybe good morning to some people. My name is Sarah Morrow, and I'm delighted to be here today. I usually start off with asking everyone a positive of the day, but I can't do that I see 200 people in on this, so I'm gonna give you your positive of the day, and that is you get to travel all the way to Alaska today. You're gonna be able to see a unique rural community that is on the road system, but you get to travel to Alaska and be with us today. And as you can tell, I don't live in an igloo. Some people might think that still. So I'm gonna start off with showing you a video, and some of you might say, holy moly, like Dr. Parker was saying, just buckle your seatbelt because we're gonna walk you through this.
All right. Coming up on Railway, which is 4th is across from me.
Okay. Now I know where you are. Okay.
Now you recognize it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you want to cross there or do you want to walk up near the stores?
I was thinking I was going to cross here because then I can walk straight and just cross Jackson. Because the post office, I'm going to take a right on Madison.
Okay, can you scan a little bit more so I can see all sides? Yes, okay. Okay, when it's all quiet and your cane's up facing your parallel street.
All right. Oh, there comes a car. From the other way. All right.
Nice crossing, Katie.
Thank you. I was gonna cross earlier and then a car came down 4th and it's, oh wait.
And the phone must have moved. But that's, okay. Oh.
It might have.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So that's a glimpse of what we're gonna get to today. So to officially introduce myself, there's an image on the screen of myself, a client and a colleague staying at the Alaska Sea Life Center in Seward, Alaska. During this time working with Katie, I was within my practicum at Portland State University, and since then I've passed a certification exam, become a comms, and become a low vision therapist. The image on the screen on this slide is Katie is walking with a long white cane along a rural gravel road while included with the high visibility vest, and I'm walking behind her in close proximity. I went to Texas A&M to get my bachelor's and graduated in 08. I went to Stephen F. Austin State University to pursue my TBI, and then I enrolled in Portland State University to get my comms. And as you can see on the screen is my go-to guy. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Elijah Haynes. He is a comms that I work with, and my also low vision therapist that I get to work with at the Alaska Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We typically work with people from 14 on up. My current role there is I'm the older blind outreach coordinator for a large area. We don't have counties, we have boroughs. And our borough that I manage is about the size of Ireland. And also Elijah's backup. I'm his substitute when he goes out to the rural communities. And then sometimes I get to travel as well to provide low vision services or O&M intervention to people around the state. It's a quite large area that we cover. So I wanted to make sure and tell you all, thank you. I can't do this without Elijah or Dr. Parker or Mary, or really, I see a lot of people from my cohort. My cohort pushed me and challenged me to continue to do this. So it definitely takes a village. This is Katie. Katie is an adult client new to us, and she has been gracious to be a sponge cake, to want to learn and to help me learn in my own studies. And she was fabulous to allow all of us to kind of travel with her home. So I want you to meet Katie.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Katie. I'm from Seward, Alaska. I'm 34, and from all the doctor's appointments and research and everything else that it leads toward, that I have retinitis pigmentosa, most likely. On top of that, I was born with coloboma, which is to where the skull is fused together when you're born, which gives the less ability to develop for the brain and any other division and other things through this. So I've been working on doing a lot of stuff in training. I used to be a volunteer with the fire department. I was a baker at a local grocery store. And when I first really noticed my vision loss was when I went to an eye doctor, and she wanted to claim me legally blind.
How long ago was that, Katie?
A few years ago. Not quite sure, remember. I was about probably around 31 or so. So it's only been a few years. Mm-hmm. Don't remember the time frame.
So you said that you have RP, the best that they know. What's your field? You know that?
Currently at the moment, I'm down to about a foot of visual recognition. And when they mentioned it, the last low vision doctor's appointment from the Mayo Clinic was last August in 2018. I had 8 to 10 feet. And when I started going to doctor's appointments in February of 18, the ophthalmologist said I wasn't even near being legally blind. And then May, I was at the borderline. And then August, I was past legally blind level and 8 to 10 feet. And by the end of the year of 2018, I was down to 2 feet. And then.
So what's your prognosis?
I am now about a foot of visual recognition, and I'm still legally blind, but some people say that I can kind of claim blindness because there's not much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very light sensitive for the inside and outside of light.
Okay, and how has that changed your life?
It's changed it in a major way. I never really thought of possibility of losing my vision, let alone doing anything without having vision. So that was a very, very scary thing to even think about, let alone have it happen.
So I want you to think about the crossing you just saw. The crossing you just saw was not something that I just went to Seward and asked her to do. It wasn't something that I called Katie up and said, hey, meet me outside. We're going to cross the street together. Katie came to Anchorage. Anchorage and Seward are about 2.5 hour drive apart from each other. She came to Anchorage, and people that we see are with Division for Vocational Rehabilitation. And she went through a 30-hour assessment. And within that assessment was orientation mobility. So she went through the assessment. We talked about where her strengths and where her challenges were. And then she came back. She came back to Anchorage, and she stayed about 4 weeks. And at that time, I was still very green and uncomfortable and just not, I hadn't found my comfort zone, and I hadn't found looking through my O&M eyes yet. So as an intern, I really leaned on Elijah, and I watched him and watched him and watched him, and then he watched me, and which was very nerve-wracking because I never want to mess up. And then we decided to co-teach in a residential area with a lot of stop sign control. Then we decided to have Katie and another client work with us separately within the same environment. So proximal co-teaching. I taught one client, he taught another in the same general area. And then we ended up having them do a mini drop-off together because we were working on the same skills all the time. And we were working on the same skills with both clients. They were about the same level. And so we would walk, as you can see in the image, the first image to the right is of Katie walking towards me, taking the picture, leaving like a lighted intersection. So she would go to the lighted intersection, stop and analyze the traffic, and then they would come together. And as those 4 weeks went by, it was a lot of intense training with Katie and Elijah. He decided that it was time to role release. And so I want you to really take into consideration or to know what he says right here, because it's going to come back at the very end of the presentation. Sarah was able to get to know Katie and develop a trusting relationship and give specific instruction and travel techniques and demonstrate her own competency as an instructor. So we all know as educators that students don't learn if they don't trust the instructor, and vice versa. You have to build a trust with one another and learn, how does the student learn? And Fortunately for me and Katie, we were about the same age and we hit it off being able to just know how to communicate with one another. And that really mended her training. So after that 4-week residential time in Anchorage and learning rural travel, city travel, getting on the bus, and all the concepts that we typically teach as O&Ms, we decided that it was time to go back to Seward because that is where Katie lives. And we want to take whatever she just learned and apply it to her home environment because realistically, that's where she's going to be traveling. So a little history about Seward, just to give you some Alaskan history here. In the 1700s, there was a Russian fur trader and explorer that was trying to travel from Kodiak to Yakutat. I think that's how you say that. And discovered a shelter bay, which is now called Resurrection Bay, from a storm. And we bought Seward from Russia during the Lincoln term. In the 1900s, they developed the railroad system, which then became our ice-free harbor to be of immediate supply for the interior with the railroad. Seward, as you all can probably see, if you ever looked into Alaskan cruises or vacations, Seward is the one place where our cruise ships come in. So it's this little bitty dock and a really big ship. It's really funny to see, but this is a big tourist attraction these days. Railroad still goes through, the train still goes through. So we took a road trip. My colleague Bonnie and I and Katie, we all traveled to Seward. And you can see that it's along the coastline with mountains on the left and ocean on the right. And we ended up just following, the road follows the mountains all the way to Seward. Let's see. On our road trip, I asked Katie, now that you have the skills and you have the ability, you have your very first cane, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What, you just want to sit at home every day, or do you want to get out and about? Katie lives alone. She doesn't have any family that live with her in her home. Her brother lives in town, but other than that, she's on her own. So I was listening to her along the way and deciding like, okay, what can I teach you to make whatever we learned in Anchorage more functional in your home environment? The photo on the right is of Seward's grid system. An interesting fact, Seward has no lighted intersections. So it made for a very easy concept development to transfer. Before I leave Seward, this was my checklist. Why am I going? Is the main one. What is my main goal going to Seward for Katie? Did I consult with her assistive technology instructor? Because in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I have this project to do and it's due. So I think I need to try to figure out, can she even connect with me by phone? Because she just got her very first smartphone. Can she even access her phone? Does she know Be My Eyes? Does she know Seeing AI? And how much cue dependency does she need from me? And how can I eliminate that within a 3-day period? I want to teach her a route to some place that she wants to go. Working with adults, that's different from kids, I think, is that it's really goal-oriented based on what the adult wants to do and what they need to do for themselves. It's not me telling them what to do. I want to verify that she has the appropriate problem-solving skills. Does she know if something goes wrong, what to do? does she have that plan B for any situation? Oops, sorry. For any situation, if she's out on a route and a storm comes through, or some stranger's trying to walk her across the street or grab her, does she know that plan B? I want to observe this route from a far distance to verify her competence and route execution. Because at the end of the day, she's an adult. She's going to travel regardless. And I need to know that she has the competence to do this. And I want her to know that she has the ability to do this, because she's already learned all these skills. It's just executing everything she's already learned. And I'm going to make a plan for she and I to connect, whether that's by text messaging, making a phone call. Does she know how to get a hold of me? Does she know how to get a hold of Elijah or any of my amazing colleagues that I work with? Does she know how to do that? And then as it went on, I added to my list. I was like, okay, so she can do this distance ed thing. We can connect distantly. But I need to lay some ground rules out and some expectations from her side and my side. It's just a big thing about, just teaching and having relationships with anybody is laying down some expectations and some boundaries. And I'm pretty sure I'm gonna need to spot a moose or a bear while in Seward. Because why not? That's the best part of living in Alaska, seeing the wildlife. So safety first. This is a clip of Katie. She's going to demonstrate what she wears when she travels and how we are able to connect when we're on a route. Remind you, this is not perfect. This was our first take. I have some ideas on how to make it better, but for this instance, this is Katie's demonstration.
So Katie, show us how you have your technology piece set up so that it would work with Sarah.
So I typically either had it in my hand and facing in to where the screen was facing me and the camera was out, because most of the time I usually had my cane in my right hand, though I'm trying to do it both sides equally, just who knows what. But otherwise I'd have it in my pocket here. And sometimes I'd leave it to a certain degree, but a lot of times so it just sinks down because it's a big pocket.
Would you recommend something different?
Maybe one that fit a little bit more, or a pocket that was up a little bit higher, or something maybe that hangs, that's where the camera is showing steadily in the center maybe. But
I know there were a few times in the video clip where Sarah asked you to angle your phone differently so that she could see something specific.
So a lot of times I'd either take it out or bring it up further and shift it over.
Like scan?
Yeah.
Beyond having a high visibility vest, where we live is highly important because of the glare that is produced, especially in this time. This was about May. The sun's coming out really bright, like today. It's been cloudy all day. Now the sun has decided to come out when I'm trying to present, and I have a high sensitivity to glare. But the sun was coming out. High visibility vests are really important in the winter time here because it's so dark. So the more you can be seen, the more movement to the drivers is most ideal. And then we talked about some bear safety. Where Katie lives, and actually where I live as well, we have black bear. And so she was highly concerned of what do you do if I see a bear or see a moose. So one of the pictures is not during the time. I did not see a moose in Seward during this time, but I do see a moose often. The first picture is very cold winter day with frost covering the trees with a moose on the side of the road. I was not driving, don't be alarmed. I was riding, snapping the photo. And then there's a picture of a brown bear on a road. This is just a Google image. I have not seen a brown bear in a civilized area. I have not seen a black bear in a civilized area, and I've been here for 6 years. Just haven't seen it. I know they're here. I know that we have evidence of them being around. I just haven't seen them. So I'm not going to show the clip about bear safety, but she ended up calling me one day and we connected with Zoom to talk about bear safety and just wildlife safety as a whole. So let's let this adventure begin. Anytime we're in Alaska, it's always an adventure. So here we go. Step one in our adventure to Katie's journey on vision rehab and being independent is I needed to analyze the environment as the comms or as the O&M intern at that point and see what is the town like. She told me she likes to go from her house to a friend's house. She told me where it was. So while my colleague was with her, I went and I scouted the neighborhood. I looked at all of the hazards. I looked at, could there be wildlife? How is she going to do this? I had to analyze the environment, and I had to look at another route. She goes to the post office, and she also likes to walk a path along the beach shoreline. So, that's what I did. And then we established some goals and some routes, and then I taught those routes to her. I taught them over and over and over again, and I watched her do them. And the more she did them, the further away I got from her to build the confidence. So Katie's house is on a very busy road called Nash. And before I left, she wanted to ask, what do I do if I need to cross that street? So we talked about it, and we talked about it today in our support group is what to do in an emergency. So I did leave Seward recommending that she does not cross this street right now with her skills, but I want her to feel safe. I want her to know that it is possible, and I want her to show me that she understands that and that she's not going to be totally scared of it if an emergency happens. But I did leave with her saying that is not appropriate at this time. We'll work on it another time to nail down those skills. But I'll show you our teaching of how to cross, and this is based on Donna Sauerberger's techniques. Okay, so we have two types of situations that we look at when we're traveling. We have situations of certainty, when we know there's a good crossing, we know that it's safe to cross. And we have situations of uncertainty. There's no true safe crossing, or there's a hill behind your house, or we have a really far distance to go to be able to cross. It's not to say that we can't cross unless it's a crosswalk. So we have techniques to approach those situations. Do you know how long it takes to typically cross one lane of traffic?
3 seconds.
Very good. You must have, you must have Googled that.
I was going to say no, but we're going to
typically, if there's 2 lanes of traffic, how long would it averagely take?
If it's 2 lanes average and 3 is 1 lane, then it would be 6.
Okay. And that's with a good amount of urgency in our footsteps, big confident steps. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna approach Nash because that is your most concern of where you live, because Nash is a pretty busy road that you have next to your house. And we're just gonna analyze it for a while. We're going to approach the intersection and close our eyes, and the first time we hear a car on our right side, you're gonna raise your hand and I'm gonna time it.
Okay.
And when it crosses you, I'll stop the timer and we'll determine if you had enough time to cross this road safely.
Okay.
And then we'll do it again for the left side. And we'll just see what that's like. Okay?
Okay.
And then once we're all done, we'll cross it together.
Okay.
Okay? All right, let's go.
Sarah, this is Amy. Can you hear me?
I can.
There's been a request to make the video full screen just for the crossing that you're about to show so that it's more accessible to the participants.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. To be a lull. Oh yeah, you did have a nice curve to your left here. Wait, we're all quiet. You're all quiet and listen for a car on your right. I hear it. Now. But no, we're not crossing. I was gonna say. So, from the moment you heard that first truck, did you know that you had two cars go?
I did.
And tell me about those cars. What happened there?
Two cars that went by, or two cars that came together. You had the big truck,
Mm-hmm.
and then that was slowed down and it turned, and then there was the other truck that went straight ahead after the other truck.
Right. So it was 19 seconds for both cars to go by. The first truck that came was at 14 seconds. So you could have crossed safely. However, what are some things to think about with a big truck like you just had?
I couldn't even hear the truck behind me.
Right. So do you think we could have heard a car coming from our left if we had that big truck there on our right?
High possibility of no, but it said maybe.
So
depending on what the circumstances.
We could just not cross when we hear a big truck like that. Just wait for it to pass and just wait till we know that it's more certain than what it is right now. Okay. So I wanted to show how busy that road is and just paint a picture for you. Nash ends up being a good sound source for her as she travels from her house to her friends, because it is the main road. It's heavy traffic. So this clip is, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just simply wanting to paint you a picture that we went over these routes multiple times, 3 to 4 times. This is the last time before I'm leaving to allow Katie to do this with physical support. She did try implementing some technology with it. She did learn that technology got in her way and it was too distracting for her. And I reminded her that at the end of the day, she needs to maintain orientation and to think about what she knows and what she's hearing in the environment. And sometimes it's best to just put Soundscape or Nearby Explorer, just stick it back in your pocket and just stick with what you know. Go back to the basics. So she's traveling along a long road, gravel road to her friend's house.
Sarah, this is Amy. This may be the point, but the sound is also a little bit muddy.
Okay.
For this particular video, so you might have to describe some of the sound.
Okay. And I'm actually just wanting to show the environment, so it's not going to take much longer.
To Brittany's house yet?
So she just crossed this long driveway and got lost in it and veered way into someone's driveway, and she thought that she was at her friend Brittany's house. So I'm trying to ask her, where does she think that she is and how does she get there? So she decided that, oh, I'm not there yet. I need to keep going. So I reached the end of my driveway. I need to continue taking a left and follow the road.
Confident pace. Longer strides, a sense of urgency. The slower we go, it's gonna.
I think some of it is that it's kind of bumpy where I'm walking, and that fear of falling.
So this was just simply just to paint a picture of her environment. To get to her friend's house, if she has a good amount of urgency, if she has good confident steps, it could take her probably a 6-minute walk. And there's no crossings. There's no stop signs. She just has to know how many driveways that she's crossing to know that she is there. So this is just one of the routes that we worked on. And I'm going to tell you that this route, we ended up saying, no, we are not going to work on distance ed together. One, for her own confidence with wildlife and just not having me there all the time and the potential of not stable internet for the both of us. So I'll touch on it in a little bit later, but this is where I taught her friend on how to support her, because if I can't, I need to know who her support system is. We were talking about the plan B. Amy, did you have something?
Oh, yes, I just wanted to touch base and say it may be time for a brief 5-minute break. Sarah, you're doing an amazing job. Some people had just comments in the chat pod while you were presenting. Elijah responded to some of them about the details of how long Katie had training when she was in Anchorage. Some of those details about the assessment and details about how many hours she had spent before returning to Seward, and Elijah's been responding to that. And then several people in the chat pod were just saying how nice it is to see these video examples, that it is a confirmation for them in their own teaching.
Oh, good.
So we are going to take a little bit of a 5-minute break, and it's mainly for Sarah and for
I'm
our.
gonna do one more slide to finish
Okay.
this step. One more slide and then we'll go, if that's okay.
Oh, sounds good.
Thank you. So that was just one route. The other route was going to the post office. So for Katie, she lives too far from town. So her method to get downtown is to take a taxi. She takes a taxi, she gets dropped off, and then she has access to the grocery store, to the post office, to the independent living center, to other businesses and eateries. So this is a photo of Katie standing on a curb cut, waiting and analyzing traffic with her cane across her body and in the waiting position, waiting to flag. So one more video of another route of just painting a picture of the town and the intersections that you can see Katie crossing. She's across the intersection from me. As you can tell, Katie needed 0 cues. So at this point in my visit to Seward, I felt confident in Katie and her abilities to travel to the destination she needed to go. This expressed to me Katie's own confidence in herself. She is occluded during this time, so she has a lot of, or very sensitive to light. So we prepared for both situations. We did visually and non-visually, just to prepare for that, because if it's so bright out, it's going to harm her vision in any way. I want her to be confident in knowing how to do this non-visually as well. So we're gonna stop there, because when we get back in 5 minutes, we can go to step 2 and get to the nitty gritty of why you all came here, is how to do this with technology.
And everyone, some people have asked about CEUs. There are Washington CEU clock hours available. This is Amy speaking, by the way. There are ACVREP credits available for this session. And then we do know that there are several substantive questions in the chat pod about the nature of whether this has been tried with children as well as adults, some details about how many days Sarah spent in Seward. So there'll be some more opportunities for discussion and Q&A. And we will actually have Elijah and Mary join a type of panel discussion to support Sarah in answering some of those questions during our discussion time. But right now, let's take a 5-minute break, stretch your legs, get something to drink, and we'll be back. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, interpreters. Take a break. Welcome back. Just hoping the interpreters are back. Thank you so much, Sean. We're very thankful for our interpreting team. I'm just checking in with Sarah.
I am back.
Welcome
Thank you.
back. Welcome back.
I want to say, getting a few messages along the way. Thank you all who are sending me text messages throughout this. And Brian, Gary will work on it. We'll work on it. And Amy, just let me know when to continue, and
We are ready to continue, Sarah. Thank you.
yes. So I want to put a disclaimer out there that while I was in Seward, yes, Elijah trusted me and role released and understood that, you know, as an intern, whatever I do, if I make a mistake, it's on him. It's his license. He's the O&M. But luckily, I had Mary and Amy with me during my time in Seward, and on the first initial route teaching, Mary was with me. So that's the disclaimer. I wasn't just thrown out there by myself for the first time in Seward all alone with this client. I did have experienced support with me. So that's my disclaimer on that. And as far as what's happening at the center and how it all works, we can discuss that towards the end. So I just want to move into step 2 of why you're all here. Step 1 was teaching and teaching and teaching and teaching and talking about goals and how to get there. This part 2 was follow-up. How are we going to connect with one another to continue her motivation? Remember, she lives alone. She doesn't really have any family there besides her brother. To stay motivated, to get up and have purpose for the day. And maybe that means going to her friend's house or getting up and to go pay her bills in person instead of online, or just going to the grocery store, going to the post office. So how can I facilitate that support for her? Because why not? As an O&M, I need to make sure that, okay, is she doing it? Is she doing it with safety protocol? Is there anything that I can help critique? And yes, I can stop her through a phone, because remember, we established some expectations and some guidelines. You're going to see that through as we get going of how that portrayed. We did trial and error different types of technology, using a GoPro, using FaceTime, using Zoom. We tried the whole YouTube thing, but that wasn't live. And I wanted live interaction with Katie. FaceTime worked when I was in Seward with her, we practiced. But once I went back to Anchorage and she was in Seward, FaceTime failed for us miserably. So she packed up her stuff. She said, I don't want to do this without you. Plan B was get a cab. She got a cab. So we always had a plan B, and we always followed through with each other's expectations and boundaries because of trust. So what worked for us is not going to work for everybody. For us, Zoom worked. Some people say the quality didn't work for them. It might not. It might not work for me to someone in Kotzebue on the West Coast, and that's very likely. So you have to trial and error, and your client has to be client or student or paraprofessional or someone else. They have to be willing to be flexible as you trial and error this, and know that it's okay to revert back to plan B. Step 3 are those expectations and boundary for clear and communication for safety protocol. Like I said, distance ed is not for everyone. It takes training, flexibility, some enthusiasm, and most of all, trust. This photo is of my setup. I never took a picture of it back in May, so this picture is taken by my husband sitting in Dead Horse on the slope with our computers. The first one, this is my exact setup that I had. On my iPad, I have of Seward, the map, and I would zoom all the way in on a satellite view so I could see the streets. I knew when I left, based on my own memory, where everything was, what restaurant was where, what store was where, what crossing, what the crossing landscape looked like, if it had a curb cut or not, if it had tactile landmarks or not. I remember that. I walked it and walked it. I took several videos, several pictures, and I just have one of those memories where I can just remember a photographic memory of an environment like this. And it's quite small. And I had been here before for my own personal enjoyment. So I knew Seward. On the right computer is of Zoom, and that's where Katie and I would connect. So I always want to hear about how my student or client felt, because it's going to be a different interaction or experience than what I have. So Mary did some interviews with Katie, and here we go.
So how did Sarah support you during your street crossings?
So I told her when I was approaching the street, and then we would go kind of like in a checklist of making sure the cane was in the right position, what I'm looking for, if it was all clear. You know, there are no stop sign or stoplights in town, so it's all either stoplights or stop signs, and you're going wherever and crossing whenever you can. And so it's by when I'm comfortable and it's safe.
So how did Sarah?
So there you saw or heard Katie give how I support her through our expectations, and you're going to hear it again through a practical application.
It's all clear. And we're across. Good.
Why did Katie tell me that it's all clear? Because that's what we talked about. I need to know that you know that it's all clear. And I want you to all to know that this experience, and I'll say it again at the end, was very liberating for me, because I had to step foot in my colleague's shoes of what it's like to be visually impaired as an O&M, and to rely on my own hearing. And I knew that Katie's hearing was sufficient, and that she trusted it to know when to cross. And if I ever said no, she would stop right then and there to not cross. So forgive me for teaching the one day that I have my son at home, but he is with me while trying to teach.
Okay, so here's that crossing, and go up to the sidewalk or the end. And it's all quiet.
Good sense of urgency there, Katie.
It can be pretty busy.
Post office.
I did. And they still haven't touched the bump dots. I checked yesterday.
Oh, good.
So as I'm going through this distance ed model, there's always room for encouragement. There's always room to continue to give positive praise, to tell someone how great they're doing on a skill that you've been teaching and on the concept, and also room to look for teachable moments. And I lost the presentation.
Do you have it, Sarah? Or would you like me to pull it up?
I have it. I just need 1 second.
Sure. While she's pulling that up, there were a couple of questions in the chat pod about liability, and we know that that's a big theme in all of this practice. It's part of what we're hoping to discuss in the discussion section, but all of you have access to the distance consultation module. It's a link on one of the slides, and it's open now for field testing. So we go into a lot more depth about the context around when this is appropriate and how it's appropriate. So she was not using a GoPro, she was using her iPhone. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, the GoPro is not live, so I wanted to be live with her. So she used a phone in her pocket, so she was hands-free. Every now and then she would have to move it, or if she was at an intersection, I would ask her if I could see her feet, if I could see her cane. But most of the time it stayed in place, and yeah, the GoPro thing, it worked for me when I was sending videos to Elijah, but for this particular situation, I needed to be live with Katie. I wanted to give her live support. So things do go wrong, and it's very important to know what that experience might be like for your client. And this happened to me. So embrace yourselves, or brace yourself.
Can you see okay? Video? Ooh. Oh, can you still see me all right? I can't hear you anymore.
So I went silent. Katie no longer had support from me, and she did what she was taught. She was already in the middle of an intersection. She knew to continue going. We'd never stop in the middle of an intersection. And as she got to the other side, I'm sorry I didn't make that a large screen. I just realized that. I apologize. As she crossed the intersection and got to her next sidewalk, she stopped, because that's what we talked about. If something goes wrong, when you're in a safe area, go ahead and stop, and let's reevaluate, and let's go to plan B. And that's what's happened. We no longer had communication. So here's my piece of advice. Just don't turn yourself off mute, or don't mute yourself. And it was very scary for both of us. I was very embarrassed, but things happen, just like they happen when you're physically with a client or a student. Things happen, and it's a learning experience for both of you. So, and here's Katie's takeaway from being her instructor going silent.
So Katie, we just watched a video clip where you were talking to Sarah, And then all of a sudden she wasn't responding. And you were saying, Sarah, Sarah, are you there? Sarah? What was that like for you?
Sarah, the video has gone silent.
Button or something and it slides down or the volume goes down. But most of the time I use my Bluetooth so I can hear or she can hear me, and maybe the connection went wrong or something. If I hadn't realized, when I didn't realize it, I had no fear or anything or nervousness because I didn't know. But if I wasn't as confident or I was worried about something, then it could be a little nerve-wracking of not being able to have that connection.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you would have just stopped and waited, or would you have kept going?
It would depend on the circumstances. So if I was crossing the street, because a lot of times she would be silent when I was crossing when we agreed to go, and then she would respond afterwards when I said I was across. If she hadn't responded then, I might have caught on sooner or later. So if I was in the middle of the sidewalk, then probably I'd stop and check.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fast forward through the slide, but basically the slide is showing 2 video clips that Katie and I do have a relationship because we are closer to the same age. It's more friendlier than professional versus client. However, I know that in this instance, there's a lot of safety involved, a lot of liability involved, and I cannot have Katie just chit-chatting, just getting to know each other type thing while we're walking. So she wants to get personable, which is understandable, but I immediately redirect her to stay focused on what we're doing, because at this time it was very nerve-wracking for me to make sure that she is safe and able to listen to her environment and to her cane. One piece that is really important here was I knew where Katie was. As the instructor, I know the environment. I have to maintain my own orientation by looking at the surroundings that she's passing. And remember, I'm following on my map on my
on
iPad.
The left, the cafe where you stayed.
No, I was on the other side.
It is. It's over there.
Oh, right.
So it's on the other side of the street, but we're past.
Well, I'm glad you know where you are.
I had him drop me off this morning there, and I grabbed a coffee and then walked down to the Sea Life.
So the big important thing here is if I'm not able to live track her, I need to know the environment. And that's the same that goes when you're working with someone physically in person, is do you know, as the instructor, the environment? Do you know where you are? Because if you don't know where you are, then how is that practicing what you preach with your clients? So the next slide is finding a teachable moment. At the end, I'm going to go over some overall tips. And the one thing is, remember, you're going to be when you do distance ed, to build on your concepts that you've already taught. It's reinforcing them. It's not typically best practice at this time to teach new concepts and new skills. And here's how we can direct them.
No one else.
I apologize.
All right, it's all clear.
Okay.
I had to step back earlier because there was that car that sitting at the intersection across from me that didn't want to go.
That's okay. I'm gonna teach you next time. It's called a reverse step, which is essentially what you've done, but next time we're together, I'll teach you the research and what it is and how to do it.
Okay.
It's to catch the driver's attention, and let them know.
Okay.
So just finding that teachable moment and just how to redirect that, and just keep building on what she already knows. And I want to show you that we did some indoor travel in a post office. I taught her how to get to the post office and then a route to her exact mailbox, and we put bump dots on her mailbox, so if she was trailing, or hand trailing, she would be able to actually locate that box.
Awesome. And if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to take me into your mailbox and just to see that.
Yep, we can do that. There's one. There's two. And here's the 1, 2, and 3 for the bump dots.
Yay, how exciting, successful. Zoom O&M from a distance route.
Awesome.
You seem much more confident on this route. You can tell that you've done it more than what we've practiced.
I have. Good morning. Good. How are you doing?
Well,
Very exciting for Miss Katie. And I'm just gonna continue going quite quickly because I want to take some time for everyone's questions. At the end, we talk about, okay, Katie, you finished your route. How are you going to get home? And her plan was to call the cab because she was going to go to a different friend's house afterwards. So I didn't need to be there for that. So she ended up staying there at the post office, sitting on the bench, making a phone call to the cab. This clip, when you get your link, you can watch it. It talks about how many times did we do each route. We did about 3 to 4 times for each route before I felt that I was ready to depart, and that she was able to do this on her own. The route within her neighborhood, she does with her friend, and we have communicated on how to best step in and when not to step in. But if she's walking with her friend, she doesn't need to be there as an instructor. She can, take an arm, put her hand on the stroller as she pushes her friend's baby down the street, and more be able to chit chat and hang out kind of thing. I thought Katie was a perfect fit for distance consultation because she was willing. She was flexible, she had enthusiasm, and we trusted each other. And she is just one of those people that this was just gonna work with. And she was gonna travel anyway, so why not just do it through distance ed where I could record it so I could be there to support her. There have been times in our journey together where I said, you know, we need to work on that some more. This is where you need to practice. But she was a perfect fit for this, I thought. And she was able to take some constructive criticism, and she's able to give it too. And this is what Katie has to say.
Katie, I know that Sarah did some distance consultation with you. Did that work for you very well?
It did. It helped me a lot to where I was able to be more confident out and about in town, especially it being rural and not many people that are blind or visually impaired in my area, and more comfortable being out and about with the cane and being able to get some questions answered, if not through text messaging, that FaceTime or the consultation meetings. It worked out really well.
And I have a couple more slides, but this last clip, I want everyone to close their eyes. Except maybe the person, actually just everybody just close your eyes. And I want you to just listen, because this clip has helped me along my O&M journey, and very sentimental to me to know how to put myself in my client's shoes and in my colleagues' shoes that are visually impaired as well. Just take a listen. Close your eyes, everybody. I'm trusting you're going to close your eyes.
There's one intersection or one crossing. It's the second.
Good. Okay, you can open your eyes again. I wish I could open up the floor and everyone give me some feedback on this one, but this clip, this part of my distance ed, I got to hear and trust Katie's cane, just like we teach Katie to trust her cane. Trust what you're listening to, trust the feedback that it's giving you. What are you hearing? We heard her going from 2-point touch to constant contact to analyze where she is at the intersection, to get the tactile landmark. So yes, distance ed can work, you guys. It can. I'm not saying that you need to never step foot in an environment and work with your clients or your students. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, just because if you're sighted, a sighted O&M needs to see what they're doing all the time isn't necessarily the case. You can listen just like they can. Trust your own ears and trust what you know, just like we encourage them to trust what they know. This is Katie today. Katie now has her very first guide dog. She just graduated from guide dog school end of February. I believe her dog's name is Dozier. And this is my comms, Elijah Haynes, and I'm going to open the floor up to Elijah so he can provide his own comments on this journey that we have gone through together.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, so much. And yeah, this was a new process for me too. I think the biggest thing I want to stress, there's been a lot of really good questions about Katie's assessment and training and kind of the build up to all this. And the biggest, censure for me that she was a good candidate for the distance was that she had done a lot of training in Anchorage, which is a big, busy city for Alaska. And in addition to the training, she'd also been traveling on her own in the city to a work placement site that we had arranged for her. So experience being on buses, crossing big intersections. So going from that big, busy environment to Seward, which certainly has its own challenges, I just definitely felt that she was prepared to take that on because she was already doing really advanced travel, really high up in the curriculum already independently, just totally on her own, not even as part of a lesson, but as part of her work study program. So I thought it was important too that, Sarah was in Seward and looked over the routes beforehand as well, got a feel for the area. And, we're using Google Maps and those tools as just really to supplement. I'm sure every O&M has maybe looked up a route on Google Maps and then you get on the ground and it's very different in reality because there's been construction or it looks totally different. So she had been, feet on the ground and knew the area and knew the unique hazards of the environment too. We talked about the wildlife, the moose and the bear, and just other unique challenges of the environment as well. And this particular client, some of their personality characteristics were really conducive to this because they ask a lot of really good questions. They're processing aloud a lot of the challenges that they have. I think it'd be very difficult for a client who was more reserved, who wasn't vocal about challenges that they were facing, or not vocal about the emotions they're feeling on lessons. So she was very transparent with us about that to judge her comfort level as well too. So yeah, those are my general thoughts, and I know we'll have some time for questions too. But
Thank you. And I see some comments about school-age children, and I want to emphasize my next slide. Maybe if I can get it to work. So, school-age children, with Katie, with anyone, take what I showed you today and think about all of your, the population that you work with. Katie was a person that didn't need a support system at that time as far as me teaching someone else. We have since taught someone else. But for school-age children, they're probably walking with their parent or a paraprofessional or a TVI or somebody else most of the time. That could be their support system. You're not teaching them to take your place and teach new concepts. You're teaching them how to reinforce what it is they should be doing and the safety of when to step in and when not to. Some hands-free to use, a lanyard. I was brainstorming yesterday with a cohort colleague yesterday of, what do you do? How do you use a lanyard? I wish I was a seamstress so I could just put a pocket on everybody's shirt, just right there on the chest where their phone can just sit in really nicely. It never pops out. It's just really nice, right, and secure right there. But I'm not a seamstress. So if anyone's a seamstress and you want to make some money, there you go. A GoPro chest mount is good to do if you're going to maybe walk with a parent, or maybe Katie's going to walk with a friend, and then she's going to show me and Elijah later, and we can do some critiquing there. Teach, 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 teach. I felt Katie was ready after I left, but some people aren't ready after just 3-4 times each day or day. Continue to teach the route. But it doesn't have to be long and drawn out. It can be, let's hand trail a wall in your house. Mental mapping, let's make a map. Those are some ideas. Remember to establish expectations and communication. That's for all ages. Establish your communication needs and to make sure it's clear and concise. Always have a plan B and have fun with it. Stay on topic, stay safe, And if you're wanting any school age suggestions or different ways of working with people, I've been communicating with different ideas for different types of agencies. Feel free to contact me or Amy or Mary, but please refer to the module that they have provided for us.
This is Amy speaking. I did want to invite Mary if she would like to share a few words before we go into some question and answer. And we are going to work on access to the module to make sure that everyone can access that. It may be a permissions issue. So we'll share that with you again. Okay. Mary, you can go off of mute if you'd like.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. This has been really nice, Sarah. Really a good job. It's kind of scary to look down and see 120 names or 190 names and keep your thoughts going. I was Sarah's university supervisor, so I did some observations of her during this process and was always very impressed with Sarah, with your thinking. I know we talked through some different things, and the technology piece was very new to me. I'm not very tech savvy, so Sarah taught me a lot about that. I just felt very confident in the process that Sarah and Elijah had gone through to get to this point. And having met Katie and being able to interview her, I could understand very easily the kind of person that would benefit from this kind of service. It wouldn't be for everybody, both instructor or student, but you did really, really a nice job. And I also want to invite everybody to take a look at the whole module, because we do have a lot of other good information about role release. We have information from Dr. Nick Cassius about the kinds of training that you need to provide for anybody that you're role releasing to. So there's some really good ethical and legal information in the module. Back to you, Amy, for questions.
Sure. So I think it is really time, and we're gonna, if I overlook someone's question in the chat pod, please forgive me. We are going to voice some questions aloud. There's been a lot of talk, and Mary, I wondered if you could respond to this as well as Sarah, because you are a very seasoned comms. Working on that with children, we do take on some instances of what distance consultation is, including very low tech options for distance consultation, particularly working with parents. And I know there's a lot of discussion now about the pandemic and children who are at home with their families. And I wondered, you know, we took on this module at Portland State because of geography and because of the needs of our region and because of the shortage. And now the module takes on a little bit of new meaning as people are every day on Facebook struggling to find ideas, and people are feeling a lot of stress. They're feeling sadness about being separated from their students. They're wanting to work with families. Families are wanting very practical tips. So if you could talk a little bit about that, and I'm actually going to try to pull up the module.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that we covered in the module was the difference between working with a paraprofessional and working with a parent, because the relationship between the O&M instructor and the assistant is really different. If you're supervising a paraprofessional, that's so different than talking with parents. And so in our module, we do have some information about parent coaching. And actually ask our students to submit a video of them practicing their coaching models with parents. But what we're hearing from practitioners right now on the field is that hopefully they already have a good relationship with parents, because there's no time really to get that in place before this distance consultation service has to be put in place. You know, people are on the front lines really doing it. We also talked about that it's more appropriate to be teaching concepts than travel skills, and that when you consider the development of spatial skills, when you really take a good look at that, there are things that you can do with parents, set up activities with parents at home that are really conducive to teaching spatial relationships. And that's a pretty safe thing to teach, you know, through distance consultation methods, whereas the actual travel skills, you know, we're probably not doing that, and for good reason. We do have some students right now that are asking about using this live feed system when parents are out taking their kids around the block or to a playground. And they were asking, would that be a good time to have some synchronous technology going so that the parent could hear from the O&M instructor right in the environment that they have their child in, if they're going out at all, that is. So we've got some students that are experimenting on that, with that.
Great, Mary. And I know we don't have time on this webinar to go through everything that's in the module, or to recognize, as you have Dr. Cassius's research, which is also highlighted in this module, but we do encourage you to take a look. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can focus on the chat pod. Here's a comment from Elijah. We certainly want our client to have skills to travel back home independently while on a distance lesson. So I think Elijah and Sarah have really predicated a lot of the work that you saw today based on the knowledge of Katie, based on the knowledge of her skills, the fact that she had hearing, the fact that she was an adult, the fact that she had had a good comprehensive assessment that was face-to-face, and of course a lot of training that was face-to-face. So please don't ever hear us say that we think that distance consultation is the thing to do with every single person, or that it's something that you start with right out of the box.
Exactly. And I want to say that Elijah and I are the only two O&M instructors in Alaska working with adults. However, for the clients or people that we are connected to, we have a really good support system or team in Alaska. That we have someone that goes to the North Slope and West Coast. So if we know that someone is there and they're needing help, she's there. If someone's down the peninsula in the Kenai area, John Claire's there. Someone's in Juneau and Ketchikan, we know who to contact in that area. Even though we're the two only providing O&M intervention for the Center for the Blind, we know who to contact if an adult or a student is needing something. We just have a really good small, there's not very many of us, small group here in Alaska that it takes a village, and that was something that Alaskans do, is we lean on each other.
Nice, Sarah. I do want to draw attention to a great comment from Joanne Chalum to everyone. She says, very interesting, great presentation. I think it depends on the client. My much older clients do not have the technological skills or the desire to participate in remote instruction. Many of them also have other challenges, medical issues that would be cause for concern. I think many on this call today can relate to what Joanne is saying. I do know that there are several of my colleagues from the Oregon Commission for the Blind who serve a lot of older adults and are right there right now, actually talking to some older adults. We want to emphasize that sometimes it's the use of older technology, such as the telephone. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about, there's some great calls that are going on by NFB, providing social support, leadership by AFB that's going on. Certainly that's not O&M, but sometimes distance consultation, particularly in indoor travel, can be via phone. Particularly my great aunt Alice, I can tell you what, I never would have thought she could have ever used an iPhone, and now she does group calls. And and she's very sophisticated with it. So sometimes it's that initial support to use the technology. Some O&Ms on this call are actually doing consult with technology and using the iPhone and getting comfortable with using the phone. And is that directly O&M skills? Well, it can be related to O&M skills, right? Any comments on that, Sarah or Elijah or Mary?
I would have one thing to add too. In this examples that Sarah's given, we're doing long outdoor routes, but O&M of course is not limited to that too. So working with other ages, with people with other disabilities too. It could be route planning. It could be a technology aspect of O&M. It could be talking about fall prevention. All these other things too could be distance as well, not just a big outdoor route. They may not even have to leave their home, could be exploring one room. I did do a consultation with another intern who was working with a student, and they were making a map of their room at their house. So just other examples to do distance.
Yeah, I agree. My favorite one so far is just putting a bump dot on number 5 on the microwave and talking about north, south, east, and west, and then just keep building on those concepts and think about what they've already learned and apply it to right now, and just build on the concept they've already learned. Don't be scared of it. Pick up a phone, call them, just chat with them. Just at this time during this pandemic, how can you support them? And maybe it's just giving them a phone call to let them know that you're here for them.
A comment from Leslie Bailiff. An amazing presentation. Thanks, Sarah, for all your hard work. A few thoughts. This type of training will change our field. The issue that we're all going to face is how do we fit this into the other training for students that this does not fit. This is a changing time. And I certainly think that, like World War II gave birth to the entire field of orientation and mobility, perhaps this pandemic is also an opportunity for us to discuss equity, remote instruction when it's appropriate, role release, perhaps when it's appropriate to others in the child's environment, or partnership with families in some intensive ways. There have been some nice comments about how in Australia, the parents and grandparents are staying connected with their grandchildren. So tech skills for older adults are even more important than ever, not just for staying in touch with family, but perhaps also so for some basic orientation mobility, ways to get to your mailbox, ways to travel in your own home, ways to travel around your home. So some great comments. Other thoughts? Let me just scan the chat pod quickly.
Amy, Mary here. Just want to say that when we developed the module, we looked at distance consultation as a way to augment, not replace direct instruction. Yeah.
And I want to highlight, I just want to see by the reactions of like maybe the raise hand or hand clap or something, how many of you are comms and got your O&M by distance education? If you got your O&M degree by distance education, if we can learn it that way, why can't we just apply that to our clients as well?
I would also say that there are some nuances to distance consultation. Telepractice is also becoming a bigger thing in the pandemic. We're looking at people not going into clinics if they feel sick for their safety. So the whole issue of telepractice is becoming recognized in related services for speech and language. My son, who happens to be on the autism spectrum, was just receiving his therapy via telepractice in the other room. So I think that this is a great advancement, but we need to constantly be like Mary said, this does not replace, it's always hybrid. It does not replace face-to-face instruction in its best form. And for some students and families, it's just not possible to do distance consultation. Not in the way that we've talked about today, but maybe in some other ways. So Becky has put, please do take time to complete this very short survey. The closing code for this session is Sandpiper. Sandpiper. The opening code earlier was Hummingbird. Closing code Sandpiper. There is also a link in the chat pod if you would like to receive an ACVRAP CEU credit. There is a link to a form. So we're going to leave this room open. We are just ending right now at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much, Sarah Moreau, for stepping out in a new practice, but recognizing your mentors, Elijah and Mary. Thank you to everyone from Alaska who also added some context. Victoria Ackerman actually had to say, what is Dead Horse? She was explaining that Dead Horse is a place.
Sorry.
Someone in Connecticut did not know that, but
I'm
that's
sorry. It is a town very north, one of the most northern towns next to Barrow in Alaska. It's where all the oil field workers are at. My husband works medevac, so he is up there providing that.
okay. And we're seeing that people need some access to the form, so Becky will check that and reshare that. We're going to leave the room open for comments, but we do need to respect our interpreter's time and Sarah's time, Mary's time. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll sign off now, but leave the room open for comments and for accessing the links. Thank you interpreters as well. Nice job.